Democrats begin to unify behind Hillary Clinton.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Andy Chow, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Derek Clay, Democratic strategist, and Bob Clay, Republican strategist.
Much like 2008, it has been a tough Democratic primary for president, with one candidate hanging on until the very end. In 2008, Hillary Clinton finally conceded to Barack Obama. In 2016, it appears Bernie Sanders will give way to Hillary Clinton. This week, Clinton became the first woman to secure a major party nomination for president, and with that, the endorsement of a man she hopes to succeed.
Look, I know how hard this job can be. That's why I know Hillary will be so good at it. In fact, I don't think there's ever been someone so qualified to hold this office.
Obama's endorsement came after a meeting with Bernie Sanders. The president and Democrats have been trying to get Sanders to join the Clinton campaign, and he appears ready to do so.
I look forward to meeting with her in the near future to see how we can work together to defeat Donald Trump.
Kathy Kandinsky, can Democrats unite?
I think you're seeing signs of it this week already. They're uniting rather quickly with the president's endorsement. Joe Biden also endorsing Hillary, but also asking for time for Sanders in his own time to come behind, and he indicated he's ready to work with her. So, yeah, I think you're seeing that happen pretty quickly. I think the president's message on Mrs. Clinton this week about she's tough, she's qualified, is exactly the contrast they're going to try and make throughout the campaign to against Donald Trump. So we'll see how it plays out.
I mean, Sanders' campaign was billed as a revolution. Can a revolutionary really team up with really the establishment of the establishment? I mean, the leader, the Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton establishment.
Well, the Democrats are way more united than the Republicans at this point. When you consider the alternative in Donald Trump, naturally Bernie Sanders and the rest of the party loyalists are going to rally around Hillary. And I think that the fact that the president endorsed the Hillary this week, that helps her tremendously going into the convention next month.
Bob, Donald Trump, we'll get to him in a moment, but Donald Trump reached out to the Bernie Sanders supporters. How many of his supporters do you think will go for Bernie Sanders? I mean, emotionally they're similar, but politically and policy-wise they're very different.
Yeah, well, no, they're
Except
not.
for
No,
trade.
they're not.
Trade is a big
trade,
issue.
foreign policy, they're very similar. And you saw in New Hampshire for the first time where you had independents in New Hampshire trying to decide who are they going to vote for, Trump or Sanders. At first I was surprised, but as this campaign has progressed, it made more and more sense. What I think you've seen, and I've said this before, is on the Democrat side, you have the Democrat establishment coalescing, and they have been coalescing, and they're continuing to coalesce around Hillary. You don't have their voters coalescing around her. On the Republican side, you got the reverse. You have the voters already coalescing around Trump, but you don't have the Republican establishment coalescing. The big problem that Hillary's going to have with Bernie supporters and they always point to 2008 and say, well, everybody came together in 2008. Well, the Hillary supporters in 2008 were, middle-aged women that were feminist, Democrat, longtime Democrat activist types. Those people are easy to bring back into the tent, especially when you have a Barack Obama. The Bernie Sanders people are people that have never been involved. They don't like the establishment. They don't like either party. So by saying we all got to come together in one big happy party, there are a lot of people that don't want to be part of any kind of Democrat party or Republican party.
And it comes down to Bernie Sanders has to bring them along. Hillary Clinton did bring her supporters along 6 years or 8 years ago. She campaigned pretty vigorously for Barack Obama, gave a speech at the convention for supporting him, helping those folks come along with her to support him.
And I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to have a problem bringing the issues that he still wants to push forward while supporting Hillary. He can still go on the campaign trail with her and sort of keep her honest and keep her on the talking points that he wants her to throw in there now and then. Now in 2008, like Bob said, there was a support of Hillary people who were saying it's just not our time. Let's throw our support behind Obama, and then maybe in 8 years. And I think you're starting to see this with Bernie people, the reformist, social socialist issue type of things, where those supporters are saying, listen, it's just not our time. We got very far with our guy Bernie. Let's throw our weight behind Hillary, and then we can get a candidate like that in 8 years.
Is that where Elizabeth Warren comes in? Because she is younger than Hillary Clinton. She has the reformist agenda that Bernie Sanders has. If she supports Hillary Clinton passionately.
I think it definitely helps. You know, I think that the supporters that are on Bernie Sanders' side are more liberal in their thinking. So are they going to vote for Donald Trump? No. So the question is, do they go out and vote and work for Hillary Clinton? And I think that they do.
Kathy, she is the first woman to secure the nomination for major party nomination for president. I think the historical impact will really hit come the convention when she is nominated and gives her acceptance
It seems
speech.
kind of anticlimactic this week to me, didn't
Is it because she's the first woman, but she's the second Clinton? Is that what it is?
Maybe that's what it is. You know, I thought, well, I know the Associated Press reported the day before she clinched it.
Yeah, that didn't help.
They projected that she clinched
And
it, so
that was not a surprise. I mean, that was a tactical move that they planned so that Bernie Sanders would not do well in California.
Well, I don't know.
That was an
I still
accidental.
think it may have been, but didn't you feel like it kind of took the wind out of the sails of her big night? I mean, it felt that way to me.
No, I think, and there have been reports that the campaign, what the campaign was trying to do was trying to get superdelegates to commit that weren't committed, so they could have that announcement. Because I mean, let's face it, when that announcement came out, whatever balloon Bernie Sanders had just deflated, and it was the day before, you know, the California primary.
Yeah. But he lost by quite a bit.
But I do agree that it'll be a big part of their convention. It has to, you know, it has to be. I mean, they got to create hype at their convention, and what better way for them to create hype than to celebrate the fact that she's the first woman candidate?
I think, Mike, it was anticlimactic because she's been running for 16 years. So I think people at this point were not all that surprised.
I mean, well, there's a lot to that. Barack Obama
She's run longer than anybody I've ever known for president of the United States.
Barack Obama, compared to Hillary, came out of nowhere, Derek, and he was the first African American. So here's a fresh face and a breakthrough candidate. Those two things combined gave it much more oomph than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, absolutely. And he knew what he was talking about. He was a well-qualified candidate. You know, he served in the Illinois State Senate. He was a United States Senator. So he had the qualifications, and he had a great agenda for the country. And that's the reason why he's president now.
Andy, now the next step in this campaign is the speculation for the next 6 weeks over who's going to be the VP.
Yeah, and I think maybe if they use that, they can keep momentum going. I think, like Kathy said too, they're going to try to push this whole thing about Hillary being the first female nominee. But I wonder how that's going to play out with younger people, because I think maybe with younger people they think maybe that's not that big of a deal. Like I would expect a woman to be in office.
Mike, you missed one other historic fact with her nomination. She'll be the first presidential nominee to be under criminal investigation by the FBI too.
Well, they say it's FBI.
The White House just said yesterday it's criminal investigation. I'm just saying what they said.
All right. It seems like ages ago that Donald Trump shed his primary opponents and secured the GOP nomination. But that does not mean Trump has shed Republican anxiety. The latest flap, Trump's allegation that the judge hearing the lawsuit over Trump University is biased because he is of Mexican descent. Trump says his statements have been misconstrued. Others are not buying it.
Claiming a person can't do the job because of their race is sort of like the textbook definition of a racist comment. I think that should be absolutely disavowed. It's absolutely unacceptable. But do I believe that Hillary Clinton is the answer? No, I do not. Do I believe that Hillary Clinton is going to be the answer to solving these problems? I do not.
So Bob Clark, that's what Republicans are going with.
Yeah.
He's a racist, but he's not Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I don't understand about all this is I thought those remarks were no different than when he talked about John McCain, when he talked about Megyn Kelly and bleeding, and when he mocked a disabled person in a campaign event.
Don't forget calling all Mexicans or most Mexican immigrants
and banning all the
rapists.
Muslims from coming in. Okay, it's no worse than any of that, but I found it interesting the amount of coverage those comments got. And the only conclusion I can come to is that just preceding him saying that, we had a flurry of polls that showed that Donald Trump was either beating Hillary Clinton or was tied with her. And I think the media all of a sudden said, oh my gosh, this guy could become president of the United States.
Well, I think the media did make a big deal out of all those comments.
We heard all those other things.
Except at the time when he said McCain or any of that stuff, everybody in the media was thinking, oh, he's not going to be the nominee.
But Bob,
and every
this-
time he would say that, they'd say, oh my God, this is it. He's done now. It's not going to, he can't continue on.
Yeah, this is what kills me though. The House Speaker just confirmed that he made a racist comment.
Yeah.
But he still supports him, and that's what happens every time that Donald Trump says something stupid. Is that they always come back and support him. And I tell you, who showed some real courage this week was State Senator Shannon Jones, who said that she was going to walk away from the GOP delegation because of her values, essentially.
To the convention. She's just
To the convention,
She's not
yes.
going to the
Yeah,
convention.
He's not a true conservative, and she knows that, so she's not going to, which is a lot of conservatives are having that problem with Trump.
Well, on the flip side, though, you have our U.S. Senator Rob Portman, who made similar statements of Paul Ryan, saying, I absolutely disavow these comments. These are wrong. He needs to apologize. But I'm still going to endorse him. I'm still going to vote for him. And so the question is, and the question I asked Portman was, where do you draw the line? When do you stop supporting somebody, not because of their policy, because of their character?
The question is, what does that say about you?
Yeah.
You know, when you continue to support.
Kathy, they're
The
stuck.
problem is they're in a box. They've been in a box since it became apparent that Trump was going to be the nominee, and they're still in that box, and they're going to be in that box and through the election.
And it's a box that the Republican Party built because, unlike the Democrat Party, they actually allow the voters decide who their nominee is going to be. We don't have superdelegates who could have switched this. If we had the amount of superdelegates going on our side that Democrats have, Donald Trump would not be the
I
nominee.
think that Republican leaders chose not to engage. I think they decided too late that he could
So
become
did
the
Bernie
nominee.
Sanders. I mean, that was also
But
a
I'm
problem
just saying
too.
there are ways to influence the election. And I
Sure.
think that a lot of
And
Republicans
we should
never
have
thought
jumped
it would
in
have
earlier.
happened.
Not
Everybody
starting
should
with
have.
17 people would have been a good
Yeah,
idea,
I mean,
too.
and that was the problem. They only and with Hillary, they only had 2 or 3. But yeah, nobody took these guys seriously. Took Trump and his people,
Well, it was
and this is what we got.
They were operating under the old model where you can't attack your Republican Party opponent in the primary because you want that person's supporters eventually. So that was the first 6 months of this campaign. Ted Cruz, even Marco Rubio and John Kasich didn't want to annoy the Trump supporters, but by the time they realized they had to annoy him, it was too late.
And it's a problem both parties have this year because Democrats have to support a nominee where the vast majority of people think she's a liar. Now, in the past, you would say, how could elected officials support somebody who the people view in that kind of thing? But the parties decide who they're, or the people in the parties decide who are going to be their nominees. We can't choose, so we end up this year with the 2 most flawed candidates and most disliked and most dishonest in people's opinion than we've ever had in our
I was going to
country's
say the
history.
negative ratings for both these candidates are so low, probably lower. I'll have to do some research on that, but probably lower. I think last Pew poll showed Hillary Clinton at like 36% maybe.
Approval, yeah.
Approval. I don't know what
Trump's right-
was slightly below
Yeah.
that. It's fascinating to me. It's it truly is for a lot of voters this year going to be the lesser of two evils.
And you know what? We look at all these events as they occur during the campaign, and once again, we can't look at it the old way, where an event could really make a difference. I think because we have 2 nominees that are so well known, and opinions are so set, and that anything that happens is already baked in, and you really can't budge the numbers that much.
Now, there is some talk that Trump still could be in trouble at the convention. They might change the rules. Most people think it's far-fetched, but it's not been completely written off. That there could be some manipulating at the convention. If Trump makes another huge mistake or makes another huge controversial comment, do you see the convention taking the nomination away from him?
I don't. I think it's a lock. I think he is the nominee. I think that the GOP machine is going to have to figure out what to do with their nominee Donald Trump. But there may be some attempt to try to get him to not be the nominee, but I just don't see how it
They'd have
happens.
to convince him to go away. I don't think there could be any kind of maneuvering at the convention with rules and process and such, because I think a majority of Republicans, regardless of how they feel about Trump, feel even worse about trying to manipulate the system. I
'Cause he
think
did
it would
win
be
the
a
most votes.
disaster.
Yeah. Right.
Correct.
And I think it'd be as likely as if the Democrats would take away the nomination from Hillary if she got indicted.
And
I mean, it's just not going to happen.
I don't think there's even hope of them saying, hey, we can reel him in, we can have a little bit more control over our candidate. I think everybody's saying we can't do that either. So we do either have to hope that he backs out
Or they could try and behind the scenes try and convince him to back out.
Right.
But that's the only thing. I don't see anything happening
I don't see
otherwise.
that happening.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Trump on the teleprompter this week?
It was
He's not
odd.
meant for a teleprompter. There's a reason why he shouldn't be using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll get better at it, but it'll be odd to hear.
I will be shocked if he stays with a teleprompter.
He's so
I
much
really
more
would.
interesting to listen to. I mean, I think when he's just off
Oh,
the cuff.
stream of conscience.
And
Yeah.
you know, one last thing, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I think the one person that's being very smart about this whole thing is the governor. He's staying away from Donald Trump. I think he knows that this campaign is a train wreck. And if he knows that if he wants to run again for president in 4 years, that he's going to have to stay away from Donald Trump and any public support for him.
He actually, I think, called on Trump to apologize to the judge this week. Which
And I think it'll hurt him less by not endorsing Trump, and it'll hurt him more if he did endorse Trump in the
Well,
long
but the
run.
governor's got a luxury that a lot of these guys don't have. He's not on the ballot this
Right.
year.
And
that's the problem. We don't know yet how the Trump factor is going to be with regards to turnout.
And he's still squarely on the fence. I mean, he hasn't denounced. He denounces some of these statements, but he's still. I'm not ready to endorse
Well-
him yet, which means he could still endorse him, and he's not saying I'm going to vote against
Look
him.
at the poll numbers.
Yeah.
Well, the
That's
strongest-
why you got to
strongest-
wait and see.
The strongest thing he said is he's trending down
Yes.
for him.
So
Yeah.
he's fierce in his mediocrity. Anyway, in the race for U.S. Senate, Ted Strickland wants Southeast Ohio to remember that he and not Rob Portman grew up on Duck Run.
Ted Strickland knows where he came from. The son of a steel worker, the only one of 9 children to go to college.
I'm somebody who is keenly aware of where I came from.
Ted Strickland spent a lot of time in his old congressional district this past week, a district that Trump carried in the March primary and after the United Mine Workers endorsed Rob Portman. Andy Chow, is Ted Strickland just not taking Southeast Ohio for granted, or is he worried that he's going to lose down there?
I think that's going to be a very important region for him. This is the kind of region that has helped him when he won the governor's race a while ago. This is the kind of voting base he needs to reach out to because, as you saw in that ad, Portman's from the Hamilton County area. So even if the state goes for somebody like Hillary Clinton up ticket, down ticket, Hamilton County might go for somebody like Portman. And so where do you make up those votes? You can go to a place like Appalachia where maybe they're going to vote for Trump, but maybe they'll also go for somebody like Strickland, the hometown boy.
You know, I looked at the map, and the last time these two candidates were on the ballot together was 2010. Strickland was running for re-election for governor. Rob Portman was on the ballot for the first time against Lee Fisher. And they both won Southeast Ohio. Ted Strickland won that strip of counties along the river there, and Rob Portman won those counties, with the exception of Athens and one other county. So, Bob, they've done well. Both
Yeah, they've
candidates
done
have
well.
done well.
I
down
mean,
there.
Governor Strickland used to represent that. His problem this year, and he's not going to be able to overcome it, is that he not only supports but strongly supports a presidential candidate that wants to put the coal business, take the whole coal business and put it out of business here in Ohio.
And he worked for an organization that's big into eliminating greenhouse
Yeah,
gases.
he went with a liberal think tank before he ran for the Senate this time, and there are a lot of coal miners down there. There's a lot of people that rely on the coal industry down there, and you can't be for Hillary Clinton and expect to do well in those kind of counties. Trump will just beat her close to 2-1, I'm guessing, in those counties in this fall's election. I mean, it's just a factor of she should have never said that on national TV.
And Trump did well during the primary in those counties.
He won all those counties in the primary.
Which part of the state will be the key to this race, do you think? Is it Cleveland? Is it Southeast Ohio? Is it the suburbs around Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland?
I think you have to do very well in the urban areas, but you also have to do a little bit of, you have to make some ground in areas like Appalachia. You know, the northwest part of the state is probably going to go Republican. The centers and the urban cores will probably vote Democratic, except for like East Ohio in the Cincinnati area. But in order for Strickland to do well, he is definitely going to have to make some inroads in his backyard.
So he may lose, but he just can't lose by a lot.
Right.
Okay, maybe that's what his goal is.
You know what I think could be the biggest factor in the end, but once again, in this kind of year, who knows? The biggest factor in this race could be who's going to win the presidential race in this respect. Normally, it's a coattail thing. This year, it's not going to be a coattail thing. It's almost going to be, if Donald Trump's going to be elected president, then we better elect Ted Strickland as a check and balance. Or if Hillary's going to get elected president, we better make sure Rob Portman's there to check her. I mean, since the two major candidates are so disliked,
does that ever work?
It's almost I've never seen that before, but I'm thinking this could happen this time around.
You might see a lot of Republicans not vote the top of the ticket this time and vote down ticket. You might see a result like that.
Let's get to our last topic. The Red Flex political influence case could be over with only one person being charged and one person going to prison. A federal judge this week sentenced City Hall lobbyist John Rayfield to 15 months in federal prison for extortion. Rayfield admits he shook down the red light camera company for thousands of dollars in political donations that eventually ended up in the campaign accounts of Mayor Andy Ginther, former Mayor Mike Coleman, and former City Council member Mike Mental. But Rayfield told the judge he, quote, acted alone and, quote, was not taking one for the team. Prosecutors will continue to watch City Hall, but for now, the case looks over.
If we ever come across anything that leads us to think that there's public corruption, we're going to pursue it. At this time, this case is over.
Derek Clay, is this case over, do you think?
I think the case is over. As far as the Red Flex scandal goes, we don't know about the center plate investigation that's ongoing.
That was the trip to the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis.
Absolutely, but the mere fact that no other charges have been brought against any other persons that were named in that lawsuit, I mean, it seems that the case is over at this point.
He said he's not taking one for the team, which implies there are other team members. Who would they be?
Well, Mike, you know what is very perplexing about this whole case? We have people that have been convicted of paying a bribe. We have a person convicted of funneling that bribe, but we have nobody there to accept the bribe. I mean, that's unbelievable. But
unless
the problem
there's a pile of money sitting in city council somewhere.
It's just sitting there. And I mean, the problem they have, and they don't say it, but this is the problem. John Raphael is not talking, so they can't get any direct link to the people who did get the bribes. I think they know where the bribes went, in whose campaign accounts. They just can't prove that they were told to do that. So I think that's why they're stuck.
They were hoping, Kathy, I think that John Rayfield would turn and perhaps avoid any jail sentence.
I think that's why they were threatening, going for a much higher sentence than he actually got. But ultimately, he's going to come out and have to do something, and he wasn't going to turn on anybody.
He's going to have a lot of friends when he does get out.
But I don't know if it's going to help him. Right. I don't know that it benefits him either way, really. But
because is he still going to be untouchable when he does get out of prison? What's he going to do? Are people still going to work with him?
Well, you never know. I mean, it's a steep price to pay. But you mentioned, Derek, that there is this other ethics case that's out there, the junket that John Rayfield orchestrated for some public officials, Andy Ginther, a couple city council members, to go to Indy, enjoy the game. It was funded by a vendor at the Convention Authority. That's still out there.
Right. Yeah, that's still out there. And, that investigation is ongoing. Who knows if there's going to be other charges brought against Rayfield or not. There may be some other people that have been mentioned in the past that are connected to that investigation that may be indicted, but who knows?
What happens next? Does this all sort of fade away? I mean, there's been some reforms at City Hall, but nothing really.
You know what? I think we got a very immediate thing coming up here, and that's that special election we're having on the districts. Everybody at City Hall and the Democrat Party, which controls all of City Hall, does not want any change in our system because they pretty much control the whole game and they control all the deals that are cut in City Hall. So I think we'll see with the special election if things are going to be changing or not.
Could be at least a cloud over that
That's a good
election.
point.
Let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots, and Bob, we'll start with you.
Hey, normally we're hitting that time period where the primaries have ended and we got the convention coming up where it's kind of a lull in the presidential cycle. I don't think we're going to have a lull this year at all.
Derek.
Well, Nationwide Children's Hospital just announced over $750 million expansion on the Near East Side and South Side of the city, and I think this is going to transform the way people look at healthcare in Columbus.
One of the behavioral health is a big
Absolutely.
focus of their expansion. Andy.
The governor signed a bill that protects communities from lead contamination in their water. Even environmental groups are saying this is some of the best legislation that any state has in the country.
And I wanted to mention that behavioral health center that's going in at Children's Hospital. That's like probably the best news I've heard all week for folks. You're really seeing an integration in the last few years, and I think this shows just how much it is integrating physical and mental health services for kids. Awesome, really awesome.
Ohio State, no big surprise. We sort of all knew this was coming. Ohio Stadium, you can buy beer throughout the stadium. OSU says they're going to take, I think, $300,000 of that and pay for 2 permanent new members to the Ohio State Police Department, which is great. $50,000, ironically, will go to help with drinking problems. But the University of Texas, with a similar size stadium, made $1.8 million with their stadium-wide beer sales. I think $8 for Bud Light, $9 for craft beer. So there's a lot of money out there that'll go back to the athletic department. And we'll see how much it is a year from now. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, the WOSU Public Media mobile app, and our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.